I lived in the Sinai ranch, which is very depopulated and without any public service. A Sunday, October 10, 2010, I remember that it was more or less 10 at night at that time and I had a barbershop as a business. When I closed my shop, I started to count my earnings of the day, when suddenly the dogs of the neighbors began to bark. I also heard the voices of many children playing in the street. I didn't take much importance to this fact, because I was pretty focused counting the money. When I finished counting, it was already 10:30 at night, and I followed the noise of the dogs and children screaming, as if they were playing or something like that. But at the same time I reacted, at that time no one goes out to play anymore, because there is no public lighting. I left my house to go and leave my daughter in my truck to the other house. When I left, I turned around and there was nothing. Likewise, the dogs had stopped howling. The full moon had just come out and I could only see the shadows of the bushes when I saw a girl wearing black pants and a red blouse, with very long and shiny hair. The truth is that she looked quite beautiful. She was walking very fast. Soon we reached her and I offered her a ride. She accepted, but when she got up her attitude was very quiet, with her head bowed. Suddenly she pointed at me and said, "Here I go down," in a very high place near a river. She went down so fast and advanced that she got lost among the shadows of the trees. My daughter was scared. Without saying a word, the next day I asked some good neighbors that if they did not see something strange at night. A girl said that she saw a woman in a red blouse, who was stuck under a mosque, with her hands raised. She was praying something in front of a cat or something similar. When the girl heard the noise when the other girl opened the door of her house, she slowly got up and started walking to move away from the place. My neighbors were quite afraid and closed the doors of their houses very well. I was not afraid of anyone. That day I had drunk some beers, and when I drink generally I feel very brave. Maybe that's why I didn't notice or feel afraid of anyone when I picked up that girl. This happened to me at the end of the 70s. It turns out that I was arriving home after playing with my friends. It was already quite late and it was winter time. Maybe it was more than 12 at night. When I got home, as it was logical, my mother was waiting for me to give me a good scolding. But suddenly something stopped her and she told me with a gesture of strangeness who was the one who was peeping through the mosque's porch. I turned and indeed there was a person, or rather something, peeping through the middle of the mosque's arch. And I say something because this being had red eyes like flames. I answer that I do not know, but that right now he will see, and I immediately grabbed him by the pebbles. I clearly saw that I hit him most of the times I threw him, but he did not immute himself. I kept throwing stones at him when my mother told me that he was the devil, to which I said that the devil makes the orders to me, and I started throwing stones at him as I approached him. Next, I was arrested by my mother, extremely scared, who got into the house almost in a desperate way, to then make sure to close the door and secure the windows. I will never know who or what it was because my mother stopped me. I still can't forget that we looked at each other. And I hope I see him again, to settle the accounts for the scare my mother gave him. I was living a season in that area, and to be honest I didn't see anything strange, but I did in a motel a little further away, full of hills. There, in that place, I managed to see a fire sphere at dawn. It should be mentioned that previously, before that event, one night around 11 p.m., I was going with my family to my car, and just as we were passing through one of the cornfields, a huge slug came out of nowhere, which apparently had the intention of hitting the car. At that moment, in the opposite direction, another car passed, which reflected the huge wings of this one. Arriving at the house of one of my nieces, she tells me that this is not the first time that this happens. Something similar had already happened to her. As it is a place of many hills, people say that witches inhabit there and that from time to time they go down to the area to bother and cause trouble. My perception of paranormal events changed forever, since now there is something more than humans on Earth. What happened was exactly the day of the fight between Pacquiao versus Marquez. It was a night in which we spent in coexistence with several friends. The place was in Tepepan, very close to the towers. The house of this boy is 3 floors. and the roof goes right towards the hill of Xochitlpec. The fight ended and we spent a good time talking and listening to some music. Around 3 in the morning, my friend and I decided to go up to the roof to smoke and to observe the beautiful view that the area provided us. A beautiful clear sky was the one that was looking at that night. Suddenly we were taken by surprise when in the distance we saw 2 incandescent balls of a reddish-orange color that could be seen floating to the highest point of the hill. And no, those things weren't balloons. For some reason we started to pray, and both spheres stopped moving, they stayed there, standing, totally static in the distance. We didn't want to continue further in that place, and better we went down for our things to leave, but that's where the worst started. We left our friend's house and some guys were with us. At that time there are no more taxis on the streets, so we had to go to the avenue, almost reaching Lenoria. In short, they waited for us for about 20 minutes of walking. In the middle of the road, the guys started playing the house bells and getting to run. In one of those mischiefs, we had to run the 4 of us. I stayed with my friend and we hid in some bushes, while the boys went to the other side of the street, and so until we got together again to continue the road. Already reaching a curve, suddenly we heard a kind of whistle, but very ugly and quite rare. The dogs even began to howl. For that I calculate that it was already approximately 4:30 in the morning. When we decided to turn to the other side of the street, on the other sidewalk, the place where said whistle came from, we saw the half of a person. We could only see the torso of this one towards the head, which looked at us very fixedly. We were paralyzed by fear. One of the boys said something but he could not even pronounce coherent words, while the other began to say that there is nothing there. There are no windows where he could be peeking and that we did not look at that thing. We didn't know when a taxi came out of nowhere. He told us he was going to Lenoria, and without thinking we got on and didn't mention a word about what we had seen minutes before. In fact, throughout the night on the way we didn't say anything. After 3 days we had to go there again, but in the morning. And indeed, the place where we saw that thing, or half of it, was without any point where it could have peeped, no door. There was no window there. We really never knew what we saw, but it is real. There is something more than humans on Earth. I live in Pueblo Viejo, Veracruz. My house is located in a previous one next to an open-air channel, very close to the great antenna of a radio station in the region. My story, like many others, revolves around a strange apparition that roams the skies at dawn, that to those of us who live in the area, fills us with a lot of uncertainty. I began to notice strange things when my little nephews woke up at dawn and said they heard laughs and applause outside their window. Many times my sister went out to see what caused such a commotion, and I never saw anything, but I did hear the opposite applause, which were the noise of the fluttering of some kind of huge bird. My sister lives in a corner close to the canal, and a few blocks from the skirt of a little hill, where many neighbors had told her that they had seen a strange being on the side flying through the night skies. A neighbor confirmed his fears. He indicated that during an early morning that he came from the boat pass. He came walking, and when he arrived at the lands and dismounted, near the radio antenna, something on the side came out of the weeds and took flight. He said that the sounds they emitted seemed to be funny laughter and that the beating of his wings made a lot of noise. After seeing the animal for a while, he could realize that it has a humanoid shape, of great size, and seemed to have the body of a woman because of her protuberances in the chest, the same as breasts. The neighbor just ran as far as he could to his house and locked himself up praying with frenzy. Another testimony was that of a neighbor who told me that he was returning from a funeral. It would be like 1 in the morning, when he walked through the lonely streets of the colony. As he passed through the canal, he felt a brief chill when he felt observed. He turned and looked back to see that no one followed him, but in fact, there was no one on the street. Still, he continued his way with that feeling of alert. Something caught his attention and he turned to see, but this time to the sky. He felt his head electrify when he saw a strange bird at the tip of a pole. It was huge, with a feather-less head and some long legs that rested on the top of that pole. Seeing this The neighbor ran as fast as he could to take refuge in his house. He panicked when he heard the rumbling of the bird's wings, and that noise was overwhelming, and his growls seemed to be sinister feminine laughter. As he came to his house and noticed that no one followed him, but he had that feeling of dismay that did not leave him alone. What would be his surprise, that when he turned to look up, he saw what seemed to be a large bird with a deformed body and very long limbs. He was standing on the roof just under his door, and he looked at him fixedly. He did not want to take any more risks, and he got into his house, closing everything. He could only hear the beating of the wings of the huge bird that was moving away from there. Everything above has generated in me a fear, which prevents me from sleeping at night, like many neighbors who still feel afraid of this bird. To make things worse, most of the neighbors have their bathrooms outside their homes, making it so that going out at night or at dawn is a horror trip, waiting to see or hear that sinister bird that flies over the skies.